Thank you for letting me present 3 small stories about how we are trying to use AI to accelerate research in our lab. So we have this statement from Sam Altman, the founder and CEO of OpenAI, and it says, "I can easily imagine a world where 30 to 30% of the tasks that happen in the economy today get done by AI in a not very distant future." Okay, for me, maybe this is not too bad of a thing, because boss, or the boss, in science said, oh, I do 30 hours a week. I have 10 talking to students, 8 preparing and delivering lectures, 6 hours on a variety of committees, journal clubs, and research meetings. So if I'm doing all of this, then I am at 150% or greater of efforts. So by taking 40% out, maybe I will be able to have a normal job and take care of my family. So I was wondering, yes, so let's do that. Let's use AI to save us time. So how can we do that? So our first idea was, let's do what are the boring tasks that we are doing every day. And according to the US National Science Foundation, 42% of our time is spent on administrative tasks. The US National Science Foundation is the equivalent of the ANR in the US. So for each clinical research study, as you know, we need to prepare application forms for different ethics committees involved, investigator brochures, data management plans, data protection things, registration materials, etc. And what is incredible is that all these documents completely overlap in content, but each body requires a specific template because their template is the best. So we have a whole team that takes what is in the study protocol and adapts it to the ethics committee number 1, then adapts it to the investigator brochure number 2, etc., etc. 20 years ago, it had been shown that to initiate a clinical research study, so it's an oncology trial, you need 110 administrative steps, 28 signatories at different places of the steps, and the authors concluded that most of these steps were considered low value. In an excellent journal, it has been said that we cannot do our jobs because of research ethics committees. I do not mean that our studies are unethical, far from it, our studies are nearly always approved, but the time taken to get approval from several local research ethics committees and in overcoming bureaucratic and practical obstacles rather than the ethical problems has become the barrier to our research. So we are facing incredible bureaucracy. There have been a lot of initiatives in Europe and in the world to standardize documents, but still, when we do our daily work, we are still adapting documents from one way to another. So what we wanted to do, and it was based on our needs, was to develop and evaluate an agentic artificial intelligence assistant to support us, like it was for us, to prepare technical, ethical, and administrative documentation for clinical studies. So the idea was it would be an agent. We would give it the protocol, and it would understand the right documents to be completed based on the regulatory category. So in France, you know that we have research involving human participants, research not involving human participants, with different types of all of these, depending on the population, what we are doing, the type of data we are collecting, etc. Then, when it would have done that, it would complete all required documents with information from the study protocol, and it would also tell us, whoa, this is not in the study protocol, so I don't know how to complete that, and I don't want to hallucinate, so I will prompt this for human review and completion. As emphasized by other speakers today, the idea was not to replace our work, but to accelerate it, to automate a lot of smaller tasks, so that humans would concentrate on checking things and saying this is right, this is wrong, etc. So how does it work? Oh. So the first input is the study protocol. We think the study protocol is the scientific work, and it is as written by researchers in the format they want. Then we have a first prompt, and the prompt is intended to extract the key information from the protocol and structure it. This is a very important part because, as you know, all researchers write their protocols differently, so we wanted to have everything structured so we know this information is exactly this one, this information is exactly this one, etc. So at the end of this step, we have structured information in the JSON format, but maybe this is not important for you. Then we have like the core engine. And what does the core engine do? It takes different sources of knowledge that are directly added to the context of the prompt. And for sources of knowledge, these are the ethical and legal reference guides in France. For example, we fed it in our research with legal texts in France and with the ethics information brochure from the INSERM. Like, you know, they have like a very detailed brochure, like this is what this type of study and it should go through these steps. So we gave it these two documents. They are added directly to the context because now it is easier and quicker to do that rather than fine-tune our own model. Plus, if somebody wants it to use it in another country, rather than re-fine-tuning a model, they can just take out our source of knowledge and put theirs. Second, where is it? No. There, we have the document templates to be completed. So these are, for example, the specific application forms for local ethics committees. Then the machine does its magic, and it gives us two different things. First, it generates, of course, the completed documents that we asked for it. And second, it generates a report on any missing information points that couldn't lead to the completion of the documents, and on specific points to be verified by humans. This is a very proof-of-concept automation workflow that we developed using N8N, which is an open-source orchestrator, no code. And the idea was to build a tool, no code, so that researchers from our team would use it, would put the protocol on one end and would get the output on the other end without having to type any type of code or without having to adapt the tool. To test its performance, we tested it with 44 protocols submitted to Compare. So this morning, Alice told you about Nutrinet, the open platform for nutrition research, and Compare is a little sister or little brother dedicated to research on chronic conditions and multimorbidity. Compare is a cohort of 65,000 patients with chronic conditions, and these patients regularly complete questionnaires that allow to collect patient-reported outcome measurements and patient-reported experience measurements, and all data in Compare are available to public research teams to answer research questions. So every day we receive, maybe not every day, every week we receive new projects from researchers, and we need to prepare all the documents. So we have all these protocols, and we have all the documents that were generated by humans. So what did we do? We did it retrospectively in regards to what Jörg said, and we compared the AI-generated documents and the original documents field by field. So it was a total of 2,508 fields compared, and we checked whether the automatic datation of the study regulatory category worked well. We looked at the completeness of information, and we looked at the consistency with the original information. E.g., lack of hallucination. Our results is that for about 10% studies, the AI missed the correct regulatory category, but it usually overrated it. That it said it was a research that would involve human persons when in fact, it was a research that would not involve human participants. The main reason for that, and it will be also something we will see in our other projects, is because of the implicit contents. For example, the research don't state that they use retrospective data, but it's obvious for them, it's obvious for us, but it's not obvious for the AI. But regarding completeness and consistency with the original information, it was 100% correct. So every field we looked at, we said, we could have written that, maybe worse, but we could have written that. So in the end, this is a very proof of concept. It was a trial and error, and it needs to be refined, but it tells us that maybe it is possible to considerably accelerate bureaucratic tasks in research. In fact, the problem is not to develop the tool, but to embed it in our existing processes. So we have already thought about different problems, and the first and main problem would be how to avoid automation bias. Now that we have these tools that functions really well, it is very tempting to put every protocol and say, oh yes, then we will submit this. And we don't want this because we want to be responsible for what is submitted to the different institutional bodies. So we need to think about how we will oversight the process of the tool and how we will be able to check whether it's correct or not and how we will be able to keep humans in the loop with this tool. The second thing is that, as you have understood, we have worked on a proof of concept evaluation study using publicly available protocol, but now we will have to move to confidential protocols and we will need to deploy the system on-premise locally. So this is already something we have thought about and we already know how we will do it, but we will need to do that and embed that in our processes. So to answer our first question, yes, it was possible to accelerate research and reduce the number of bureaucratic tasks we are doing. Second story. So analysis of open text data. So Astrid told you about this morning. For those who don't know me, I've been working for the last 15 years on developing methods for citizen science and mainly leveraging online surveys with open-ended questions. For example, we have developed citizen science studies where we asked patients with chronic conditions, well, if you had a magic wand, what would you do to improve their care? So they answered in open text, and humans analyzed the open text and identified 3,600 ideas to improve consultations, hospitals, and the care system. This research had a lot of impact because even before publication, results were asked by our government to inform Ma Santé 2022. The bad thing is because COVID happened and Ma Santé 2022 was not a game-changing thing. And the second thing, it was also cited as an example of citizen science by the RAND Corporation. Another example of how we are using online surveys with open-ended questions is that we are reinventing methods for core outcome sets. As you know, core outcome sets are minimal sets of outcome measures that needs to be captured in all studies in a given topic. So usually to define core outcome sets, people assemble 10 persons in the room and they say, oh, we believe this is a very important outcome and everybody is very happy. But maybe we said, nah, maybe we can involve massively patients, caregivers, and clinicians worldwide from all countries to identify what would be the relevant measures, outcome measures in that disease. So this is a paper Astrid presented this morning, Proceed, on identifying outcomes that matters to patients. So this is like the front page. We are very proud of it. What is behind the scenes is that. So of note, this is a hope for me that AI will not replace me. So I provided it my photo and I said, make me look tired, and I don't think I look like that at all. So it is not perfect yet. So what is behind the scenes? For Proceed, it's 3,000 participants from 52 countries. It's 8,000 open-ended answers collected and about, I think, 300,000 words that were analyzed. And what is qualitative analysis? So it involves first reading all text to get a glimpse of what they talk about, then reading each answer separately and identifying the key words, that's the atomic parts that are meaningful for the research questions. So here will be the meaningful parts for determining that this is a very important topic or very important domain for patients. So the identification of the atomic parts is usually called coding. And then when we have all these smaller codes, you group them by similarity. And this is like what we call themes. And this is now thematic analysis. And then you group themes into larger categories. So this is a very, 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 very tiring task. And for example, for this study, I think Astrid has spent 9 months in a cave, reading all text one by one to categorize them. And then she involved a second reader to be sure that she would not be results would not be biased by her own perceptions. So another reader did exactly the same work in his own cave, etc. And then we did it in a different language, so in English, and then we also did it in German because the study was also in German. So in the end, it was probably like thousands of researcher hours to do that. So it is similar to evidence synthesis. Of course, people have been trying to use automated processes for very long to do classification and of documents or small part of text. For example, when I began my PhD, we were using Alcest, which is a very basic way to do it. Before the emergence of LLM, what was considered as a good standard was latent Dirichlet allocation. And it is a statistical model or way to approach things where each document is considered as a mixture of different topics. And each topic is a mixture of words and with different probabilities. And the model infers these distributions by observing how many words co-occur across many documents. The problem is that this is a very linguistic thing. That is, it works, for example, maybe for the pain thing when you are identifying words which are associated to pain. But two patients answering the same idea with different words maybe would not be categorized together because we are working on words and not concepts. Second, because we are working on words and there is a bag of words assumption, vaccines are dangerous and vaccines are not dangerous, are relatively similar in terms of words. And finally, there were a lot of hyperparameters to be defined, and it was a difficult thing to do. So then LLM appeared, and we wanted to try them in an ongoing research project. So when we wrote the research project, we planned to use latent Dirichlet allocation. But then LLMs appeared, and we amended our protocol, and we re-asked the ethics committee, oh, can we try to use LLMs? We really want to use LLMs as a proof of concept of how can we use them to accelerate the qualitative analysis for researchers. So this is a study that we do in collaboration with the philosophers from Université Paris Cité, and we are trying to answer a very difficult question is, how do patients with chronic conditions appraise the notion of normal life? What does it mean to have a normal life when you have a chronic condition? What does it mean to have a normal life in a world where 50% of adults have a chronic condition, etc.? So as usual, we did a survey with open-ended questions in our cohort Compare, and we got 300,000 words, which is more or less the same amount of words as in the brothers Karamazov. So what did we do? So we have said earlier that we cannot imagine to replace the human brain, or maybe this is not even a desirable output. So first, we had two experienced qualitative researchers, the philosophers, who do a manual analysis of the 300 first answers. They identified 12 bigger themes. From these bigger themes, we developed a series of prompts to instruct GPT to code answers and provide a justification on why they thought that one answer would fit one of the themes. And to be clear, one answer from one patient could fit different of these different themes. We did that, iteratively back and forth a lot of times, and in the end, we developed prompts that were not perfect, far from it. For example, the median sensitivity to detect a theme and the median specificity to detect a theme, because it's median because we have a lot of themes, was approximately 0.7. Well, this is not good, but you need also to remember that the human philosophers did not agree between themselves. I will tell you more about that in 2 seconds. When we had that, when we used the developed prompts on the rest of answers, and then we randomly sampled 300 answers for validation. So in the validation sample, something strange happened. We had very high specificity, but lower sensitivity, and this is maybe by chance. We also identified that no additional theme was identified, neither by the AI nor by the humans who appraised the 300 validation sample. So these performances are not good. We could even say that they are bad. Here we consider sensitivity and specificity because we consider the human as the gold standard. But if we forget that the human is the gold standard and we take our two philosophers separately, agreement between philosophers was about 0.6. And what was interesting is that agreement between each philosopher and the AI was also more or less 0.6. So this all tells us that it's very preliminary. We do not really mimic what do researchers do in qualitative analysis, but we open the path with the first rigorous pipeline to analyze open text data with LLM and to try to mimic qualitative analysis. We also need to rethink about our gold standard because humans are not the gold standard. And in a very old paper where they already tried some automated ways to do analysis, not using AI, they said we will not compare that to humans because humans are not reliable. So our future work now will involve, now that we are, you see, playing with agentic AI on one hand and this on another hand, to combine that, to have like different agents working together to mimic more how humans process the data, like reading all answers, then reading separately each answers and assessing whether it is fit with an existing theme or whether it should work with a new theme, etc. So we are currently working on this topic, but this is not completely done. So no, AI cannot do that we cannot do that with AI yet. As for the last story I want to tell you, Jörg already spoiled some of it, and it was how can we screen and how can we automate some parts of the screening in systematic reviews and meta-analysis. So as he told you, systematic review is a very long process, and in a very old paper in the JAMA, they showed that a systematic review with about 2,500 citations, which would be considered like a very small review as of today, would already take 1,000 hours of work from trained and specialized reviewers. So our work was to develop a way to automate or to see how AI could automate partly the screening in systematic reviews and analysis. We did not want to fit AI for each question, so what we developed was a prompt framework where we would input directly the protocol as written by researchers to mimic how they did it, so it applied the PICOs to each abstract. At this time, we were using GPT 3.5 and we were using a zero-shot approach with no example. Why didn't we use a few-shot approach with examples? It was simply because at that time, maybe you don't remember, but the context window was really short. So if we added abstracts, then it would overload the context and it would stop the machine and say, oh, you have too much context. And then we evaluated the prompt framework in 6 reviews by Cochrane teams that were not included in the model's training set at the time. And evaluation accounted for the fact that the reference standard was imperfect. So these are our results. We tried 2 different ways to appraise the results. First, we had a very balanced rule, which included all abstracts which had at least 3 out of 4 criteria which were correct. And the sensitive rule included abstracts which had 2 out of 4 criteria which were considered as fitting. The criteria being the PICOs of the abstract. As you can see, of course, the sensitive rule is more sensitive, but less specific. To answer the question earlier from Sodabe, why did we have this performance? And for example, we had this specific review from Kieswetter et al., and it was on consumption of dairy products on health. And in the protocol, it was, yes, you take all studies that assess the consumption of dairy products on health. And in the end, we realized that we included, or the AI included, a lot of studies involving animals, when for humans it was obvious and implicit. It was not written explicitly in the protocol, but it was obvious that they should exclude studies on animals. So it shows that in some domains, some things may be implicit and maybe the performance will drop. But when it was explicit, then maybe it was easier. The other thing we had is that it was done before, during the period of COVID, and before the emergence of the term long COVID. So with one review, it had a lot of confusion when it encountered the term long COVID because it didn't know exactly what was long COVID. Regarding our research, because we were using publicly available data with a public model, we were interested to see whether our results were reproducible. So what we simply did is that we did a test-retest with a 15 days interval using the exact same prompts, etc. The temperature of the model was set to 0, and in theory, we should have had exactly the same results, but we didn't have the same results. So it shows that even if it's not explicit, I think OpenAI constantly updates the models and refreshes it. And sometimes they have these big updates, but they are constantly fine-tuning and updating it, which means that in the end, a lot of things are not completely reproducible. So it did not change the performance. It changed like, a lot of studies that some were excluded and they were included. And so the agreement was bad, but it didn't change overall the performance. So the key messages for this is that in this work, sensitivity was similar to single human reviewers. I remind you that the sensitivity of the single human reviewer is about 85%, and specificity was generally lower. Specificity of a human reviewer is about 80%. We imagined that the LLM could be used to trim like obvious citations that should not be screened by a human. And using that, we realized that we could reduce the number of citations to be screened by humans up to 45%, while only missing a very limited number of citations. But yet, we would miss some citations. In the end, but I did not present a table, we also did the opposite. We checked whether the references that were tagged as to be included by AI and which had not been included by researchers, in fact, should have been included. And we found a few ones which would not have changed the results of the reviews, hopefully. After having done this work, we were like, okay, so we can directly screen a lot of abstracts. Maybe we could get rid of the search strategy. So I remind you, when you do a systematic review, you begin by defining a search strategy using keywords and Boolean logic to filter electronic databases. And then you manually screen the results. But maybe an LLM who does not work, who is not tired, could screen all articles in electronic databases to check whether the article would fit or not without any kind of search strategy. So we did a proof of concept using a slice of PubMed, like a very thin slice of PubMed, and we tried to see whether we could identify RCTs as compared to the Cochrane highly sensitive search, which is the recommended search strategy to identify RCTs in electronic databases. What was interesting is that we identified, in fact, one RCT which the Cochrane highly sensitive search did not include because it did not use the word randomized, nor controlled, nor trial in the abstract nor title, because it said RCT, and the Cochrane highly sensitive search does not specify RCT. And we had also much better specificity than the Cochrane highly sensitive search. The drawback of that, of course, are the costs, and including environmental costs, to screen all database every time we do a review. So maybe this is not what we want. Maybe we will also want to combine that with maybe broader search strategies. But it was the example that it was feasible to get rid of one part and to change the way we do traditional systematic reviews. One other point, in linkage to what I said earlier on our screening paper, is the reproducibility of this process, and this is not evident in evidence synthesis. I have finished. So to conclude, I'm coming back to Sam Altman, and he says, I can easily imagine a world, blah, 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 in the not very distant future. And I think he may be right, we can obtain promising results on specific tasks. And we know that the models are evolving very fast. This morning, Ivan Nordin said that in 2022, the model said co-eggs, and in 2024, it was solving a difficult mathematical problems. So maybe in 2 years from now, then all these problems will be gone because it will automate more of our tasks. But if we do that, we need to evaluate carefully the use of these tools. And this is what we have been trying to do for bureaucratic research, for open text analysis, and also in systematic reviews. And finally, as emphasized by other speakers today, we need to work on how to have reproducible results and to do that in a transparent manner. Thank you very much.
Perhaps one question on the screening. So there was some false negative, and we're always getting a bit worried about false negative because it might be study that provide valuable information. Did you look into what type of study it was? Because if it's a small study that has no impact in the results.
Honestly, I can't remember, so I'm not sure why you are asking this question. I think
in the general way, should we look at
we looked at the studies. Usually, the false negatives were the very poorly written abstracts that were probably not very meaningful for the review in the end. But I can't remember the exact results and I can't detail them today. But you can read the paper.
No, but I think we always look at the sensitivity and specificity, but we need to look more deeper what we are missing. And if what we are missing is anyway bad studies, perhaps it's not a problem. On the contrary, it's a good news. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting. And my question is about your tools to produce a form for the different regulatory bodies that we have in France. So do you plan to improve it and disseminate it to our research community, including those in the same research centers as yours? And what are the future for this work?
Yes, of course. So what we have is a very preliminary proof of concept tool, and what we intend to do is to improve it to be able to expand its use on more tasks and to be able to see about the specific failures and how to deal with them. So I think it's very easy to have like a tool that works 90% of the time, but to have a tool that works 99.9% of the time, it requires a lot of work. So we are aiming to do that, and it's mainly for ourselves at first, but of course we are trying to disseminate it and in the press. So for the moment, we need to think about all the different steps before we disseminate it. Otherwise, you will say, what is this crap? So we want to deliver like a nice product for you.
Okay, thank you very much.